It was supposed to be just another Sunday. The kind where you bring your best potato salad, fake a smile, and pretend everything's fine for the sake of the grandkids. Mason and Danika's house sat quiet from the outside, all beige siding and neatly trimmed bushes like it belonged on some Hallmark card. But inside the air was thick. The kind of thick you can't see but you feel in your chest. Laughter bounced off the walls, music played too loud in the background, old-school R&B mixed with trap beats, like someone couldn't make up their mind. The smell of collard greens, baked mac, and peach cobbler drifted from the kitchen. It should have made me feel at home, but all I felt was tightness. Tension under the surface, like someone had stretched a rubber band too far and didn't know when it'd snap. I sat on the corner of the couch, half in, half out. That's what these gatherings had become for me. Half present. Half watching. Because I learned the hard way, just 'cause they say it's family, doesn't mean it's safe. Danika's mother, Riva, strutted around the room like she paid the mortgage. Loud, with that fake laugh that sounded like breaking glass. She complimented herself more than the decorations. Didn't I say this table needed red napkins? Look how good it turned out, she said, loud enough for me to hear. I smiled small, took a sip of water, and kept my peace. Used to be, back in the day, family gatherings meant something. Warmth. Unity. You'd look around and feel like you belonged. Lately though, I felt like wallpaper, still there, but easy to ignore. Then came the cake. Mason wheeled it out like it was the second coming, white frosting, gold candles, and happy birthday, pop pop scribbled in blue. Everybody clapped, phones out, smiles staged. And as always, they handed me the knife. Cutting the cake had always been my thing. Little tradition I kept for the sake of the kids. I took the knife gently, smoothed the icing, and asked my grandson, "How big a slice, baby?" "Big," he grinned. I gave him the first piece, just like I always had. And that's when I felt it. A shift in the air. Like all the smiles froze. I glanced to the side, Riva. Face tight. Eyes burning. Danika? Arms crossed. Waiting. Watching. "I'll get to you next," I said softly, not wanting to make it a thing. Too late. Riva scoffed, loud and deliberate. "Well, guess we know where the loyalty lies." I turned to hand my grandson the plate and before I could breathe, a hand yanked my hair from behind, and the world flipped. The hardwood floor met my back with a crack. Gasps echoed. Cake plate shattered nearby. I blinked, confused. Danika stood over me, chest heaving, her hands still clenched in the air. "You always think you're so perfect, don't you?" she hissed. The room froze. No one moved. My body felt heavy, but the real weight pressed from inside, shame, betrayal, and something else I couldn't name yet. Mason didn't speak. Not a word. He looked at me and looked away. That hurt more than the fall. Riva smirked from the kitchen doorway, arms folded like she just won something. My daughters shifted uncomfortably, one bit her lip, the other looked at the ceiling. I heard someone whisper, "She had it coming." I stayed on the ground a moment longer than I needed, not because I was weak, but because I was stunned. Because something in me knew this wasn't about cake. This was years coming. A slow boil finally spilling over. I rose slow. Straightened my blouse. Dusted my palms. Pride bleeding but bones still solid. Danika stepped back, maybe surprised I didn't shout. But I'd shouted enough in my younger days. Now, silence was my sword. As I turned to leave, Riva leaned in with a voice full of sugar and venom. Maybe next time you'll remember your place. I paused. My hands didn't shake. My face didn't twitch. But inside, I was fire. At the door, my youngest granddaughter ran up, holding my purse with both hands. Here, Grandma. Thank you, baby. I walked out that door, back straight, tears swallowed. No dramatic exit. No door slamming. But something cracked that day, clean, deep, and permanent. I walked out that door, but I left something behind, my silence. When I got home that night, it was like walking into someone else's house. The air sat heavy, too still, too neat, like the walls were watching me, waiting to see if I'd fall apart. I dropped my purse on the counter, and the sound echoed through the quiet. I didn't turn on the lights right away. I just stood there in the half-dark, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator. My hands were shaking, though I tried to steady them. The bruises on my scalp pulsed every time I moved. I went to the bathroom, turned on the dim light, and stared at the sink instead of the mirror. I couldn't bear to meet my own eyes. It wasn't vanity, it was shame. Shame for staying silent when my own son didn't lift a hand to stop what happened. Shame for pretending peace mattered more than dignity. I splashed cold water on my face and watched the droplets slide down the porcelain, tracing tiny paths that looked too much like tears I refused to shed. I made it to the kitchen and sat at the table, staring at the clock. The ticking filled the room like a heartbeat. My stomach twisted, but food felt like an insult. I thought of Mason's silence, how he just stood there, his jaw tight, hands in his pockets. He didn't even call after I walked out. That silence hurt more than the bruises. I went to my room and pulled an old journal from the drawer. I hadn't touched it since my husband passed. The pages smelled like dust and time. I opened it to a blank page and wrote one line, "They did it because I let them." I stared at those words for a long time. Then I closed the book and turned off the light. The morning came too bright, too fast. The sunlight cut across the kitchen table like it was splitting the room in half. I brewed coffee out of habit, poured it into my favorite mug, and let it sit untouched. The phone sat beside it, dark, cold, waiting. I waited too. No call. No message. Nothing. I scrolled through old photos of Mason, his 8th birthday party, frosting smeared across his cheeks. I remembered how he laughed when I placed a paper crown on his head. I made that crown myself, cutting it from yellow construction paper and writing "King" for the day across it in red marker. That boy used to love me like I was the world. Somewhere along the line, the world shifted, and I fell off the edge of it. I thought about how blood changes when people marry, how new loyalties come before old ones. Maybe that's what happened to my son. Maybe love has an expiration date when convenience gets in the way. I picked up the phone and called Lucinda from church. She answered on the second ring. "Well, hey, baby," she said, her voice soft like Sunday morning. "Hey, Lucinda. You sound tired," she said. "I just needed to hear somebody kind today." There was a pause, then she said, "Sometimes the people who break you live in your own family photo." Her words went straight through me. I didn't say much after that. We prayed together, short and quiet. I hung up, still holding the phone when it buzzed again. A message. Mason. I opened it fast, heart racing, foolishly hoping for something like "I'm sorry, Mama." But it wasn't that. It was one line, "You embarrassed Danica." I felt the air leave my lungs. I read it again, slower this time. Not "Are you all right?" Not "I love you." Just that. My son was defending her. The woman who humiliated me. The same silence he gave me at that party had turned into words sharper than knives. I put the phone face down on the table. My body went still, but my mind raced. I had been blind. I saw it all now, the pattern. It started long before the cake. Riva praying at my own dinner table, interrupting my blessing with her loud, "Let me do it right this time." Danica correcting me in front of guests about how to fold towels. The Thanksgiving they forgot to invite me to until the night before. Little things, each one small enough to dismiss, but together, they formed something ugly. I thought I was keeping the peace. But really, I was letting them draw the line of what I was worth. By afternoon, the house was silent again. I sat near the window, watching the light change. It moved across the floor, slow and soft, reminding me of days that used to feel simple. My reflection stared back at me in the glass, older, harder, wiser. My thoughts drifted to my mother. She was a woman of faith, strong but quiet. I could see her sitting at the kitchen table of our old house, hands folded, Bible open, eyes tired but gentle. She used to tell me, "Don't stir trouble, baby. Just pray and let the Lord handle it." And she did. All her life, she let things slide to keep the family together. She forgave and forgave until her heart gave out before her voice ever did. When she passed, I found her Bible full of highlighted verses about patience and grace. Not one about standing up for herself. I loved her, but I swore I wouldn't die the same way, quiet, buried under politeness and swallowed pain. Maya Angelou once said, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you." Those words came back to me as if they'd been waiting for this very day. I repeated them under my breath, feeling something inside me shift, like the first crack in a dam. I whispered, "I won't be another silent woman." I looked at the phone sitting in front of me. My fingers hesitated over a number I swore I'd never call again, someone from my past, someone who knew how to make people listen. And then I dialed. The morning after I called Lucinda, I found a thin envelope tucked at my front door. It was addressed to me in Danica's handwriting, or at least, I thought so. My heart caught for a moment before I pried it open. Inside was an invitation. "You are cordially invited to Riva's 60th birthday brunch, hosted by Mason and Danica." The venue was the same place where, earlier, they refused to mention me at all last year. Beneath the invitation they'd added a sticky note, "We hope to see you there. Let's keep things peaceful." My stomach clenched. I let it sit in my hand for a long time, turning it over, studying the edges. I wanted to believe it was genuine. But my gut said otherwise. I remembered how many times small gestures like this had been twisted into weapons. I thought of the many times I'd ignored signs because I refused to believe inside my own house there'd be betrayal. The thought stung. Later that afternoon, I met Lucinda at the small cafe we both liked, the one with soft brown leather chairs and warm light from the windows. She sat down, looked right at me, and before I said anything, she said, "Girl, don't you go to that brunch. They didn't invite you to include you, they invited you to validate their version of family." I wanted to argue. I opened my mouth. But the weight behind her words stopped me. She told me what she heard through her niece, someone who worked for Danica. The brunch was a spectacle, an exercise not in honoring Riva but in showing that their family was flawless. She said they'd pull people in, smile in cameras, act like nothing happened. Lucinda looked me in the eye and said, "They inviting you not to honor you, but to parade their version of family." That hit me harder than a blow. I inhaled then said quietly, "This ain't a seat at the table, it's a trap wrapped in ribbon." Lucinda nodded with sorrow in her eyes. In that moment, I saw the real mask behind the invitation. When I got home, I paced in my bedroom. The floorboards creaked. I opened my closet door, searched through dresses. My fingers brushed against a dress I wore to Mason's graduation, soft fabric, subtle lace, a dress I loved. I pulled it out and held it against me in the mirror's reflection. It fit, but felt tight in places. Not just physically, but inside. The woman I was then, the woman those clothes served, that version of me didn't belong in this moment. I sat on the edge of my bed, thinking of all the times I tried to mold myself to their expectations. My mother used to say, "You can bend a little, but not until you break." I touched the lace on that dress and whispered, "You were never invisible." They just refused to look. I drafted a reply in my head, something polite. Maybe, thank you, but I can't make it. But even as I typed it out in my mind, I felt the sting of obligation creep in. I crumpled the thought, ripped the paper I'd written in my mind, and tossed it aside. I didn't RSVP. I didn't respond. Not because I was bitter, but because I was beginning to see who I had become, someone who no longer needed permission to exist. I lit a candle in the living room and sat quietly, breathing and praying. My lips moved without sound. I thought of all the times I bent, twisted myself into peace to avoid breaking. But every time I did, little pieces of me cracked off. I could feel those cracks growing now. The phone rang later that evening. My heart jumped. It wasn't Lucinda. I arrived at the brunch venue dressed plainly, determined not to cry, not to beg, but to be present, if only to see how they meant to rewrite me. The banquet hall glowed in morning light, gold plates gleamed, banners stretched across walls, and balloons bobbed in corners. Eyes turned when I walked in. Murmurs fluttered, Mom, honoring tradition, her seat's there, but I didn't see my name on any sign. Guests whispered over glasses of mimosas. I glanced at the guest roster hanging by the entry, no Neressa Cole, no nod to my claim. I threaded through tables, ears tight for insult, feet steady. A waiter passed by with a napkin-rolled menu. My eyes caught it, honored guest omitted. They had taken even that away, the title. I slid into a seat at the table, heart pounding. The room shifted, as if aware of the game. Then, Marveline rose. She smiled, glass held high, to the family we build together. Her voice held smooth edges. She paused, then dropped this, to Danika's mother, a true backbone, and to others who helped from the sidelines. Her eyes flicked to me. The room hush tightened. Every head turned. I felt the weight in that toast, inclusion twisted into exclusion. I stiffened, knots twisting in my throat. Betrayal creeped in. Indignation rose. I heard someone murmur, she couldn't even show. Mason clinked glass beside me, awkwardly, hesitating. He should have spoken, defended, steadied, but he froze instead. My fingers wrapped around my silverware, knuckles going white. My breath caught. The air felt too thin. I sat like a statue, while that toast cut deeper than any slap ever could. Tears threatened, but I swallowed them. That moment, exposed, humiliated, yet conscious, lit a fire under me. I excused myself to the ladies' lounge before the dessert course, telling myself I needed air. Inside, I leaned against the wall, reached into my bag, and touched the invitation I'd found earlier, crinkled, damp from my nerves. I felt the envelope buckle. Then, I found it in my jacket pocket too, as if someone had moved it. My mind flickered to the countertop where I'd placed it myself. Someone walked off with it. I pried it open again. Inside were names, promises, a place of honor. But then a scribble caught my eye, half hidden in the crease, to Shira's handwriting, make sure she never arrives. My heart thundered. They didn't want me there. That invite had been a setup. I braced myself, smoothed my dress, and walked back into the dining room. The toast was completed, glasses clinking, Noble's K smiles. I rose from my chair so everyone could see. Voice low, stable, words are heavy. They mark where we belong. Some gasps. Some turned faces. I pressed on, I won't drink a toast from silence. I pushed aside my glass. Eyes burning, I said, you may toast to peace, but you cannot pretend I'm invisible. I walked out. No collapse. No theatrics. Just footsteps down the hallway, out the doors, into the parking lot. My chest was a furnace. My face flushed. But I walked. The morning after that brunch, the house sat in stillness so thick it felt alive. Not peaceful, just heavy. I moved slow through the rooms, as if each step might wake a ghost. On the walls, Mason stared back at me from a dozen frozen smiles. There he was in his Little League jersey, with that gap-toothed grin that used to melt me. There he was in his graduation gown, standing proud, arms wrapped around me like the world still made sense. I touched the glass and whispered, "Where'd you go, baby?" The reflection didn't answer, just gave me back the face of a woman worn from holding her breath too long. I poured myself a cup of tea and carried it to the porch. The air was cool, the kind that slips into your bones whether you invite it or not. The oak tree out front rustled like it was trying to say something I couldn't quite hear. I thought about calling him, just to hear his voice, to see if he'd even pick up. My thumb hovered over his name, but I couldn't press it. Not because of pride. Because I knew my heart was too raw for another blow. Sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's armor. I opened my notebook instead, flipped past pages of old grocery lists, and wrote, "Sometimes silence ain't peace. Sometimes it's a scream with no mouth." The clock kept on ticking, loud as judgment. Around noon, I tried to distract myself by folding laundry, but every shirt felt like memory. Every towel smelled like the past. By afternoon, a knock rattled the front door. 3 hard hits. I knew that rhythm, Angela. My cousin never knocked soft a day in her life. I opened the door and there she was, larger than life in her Sunday jeans and attitude. "Girl," she said, walking right past me, "you look like you lost a fight with a memory." She dropped her purse on my counter like she paid rent. "Word going round church is you made a scene at that brunch." I didn't answer right away. I just fixed her some sweet tea and sat across from her. She leaned in, eyes sharp. "You know you don't fix broken by walking away." I stirred my tea slow. "You don't fix broken by pretending it ain't." Angela's mouth twitched. "You got that sharp tongue from your daddy," she said, but her tone softened. "You've been carrying peace on your shoulders for too long, baby. Peace ain't supposed to hurt." Then her face changed. She looked down at her cup, took a breath. "I probably shouldn't say this, but Mason called me before the brunch." My heart stopped. She looked guilty. "He told me if you started something, to calm you down. Said you've been unstable lately." For a second, everything in me went quiet. The hum of the fridge, the ticking clock, even my breath, gone. My own child had turned me into a problem to be managed. Angela reached for my hand, but I pulled it back gentle. "You know," I said, steady, "people love to call you unstable when your truth shakes their comfort." She nodded, no words left in her. After she left, the silence felt different. Not empty. Sharp. Like it had edges. I stood in front of the mirror again. This time, I didn't flinch. Every wrinkle told a story I earned. I said out loud, "You ain't crazy. You're clear. And clear people scare the fog. I went room to room, cleaning, not to pass time, but to reclaim it. I dusted picture frames, straightened books, opened every curtain. Let the light in. Then I lit a stick of incense, turned on Sam Cooke, and let his voice roll through the house. The melody reached places inside me words couldn't. I grabbed my phone, typed one sentence to Mason: "If I don't matter as your mother, don't call me mama no more." I stared at the screen, hit send, and laid the phone face down. Evening rolled in slow, painting the house gold. I started cooking, oxtails simmering low, collard greens with smoked turkey, and a skillet of sweet cornbread. The smell wrapped around me like memory and defiance all at once. When it was done, I set the table for one. Not out of loneliness, out of ceremony. I plated the food, folded a napkin just so, and before taking the first bite, I took a picture. Sent it to Mason with a caption: "I still know how to serve love. Even when it's not returned." No typing bubble. No reply. Didn't matter. The silence didn't sting this time. It hummed like freedom. I ate slow, tasting every bite. When I finished, I washed my dishes, wiped down the counter, and turned off the kitchen light. The air was calm now. My kind of quiet. As I got ready for bed, my phone buzzed once on the nightstand. I reached over, half expecting his name. But it wasn't Mason. It was someone else. A name I hadn't seen in years, one I'd sworn never to speak again. I sat up, heart steady, thumb hovering over the message. I woke before dawn, still dark, the house quiet as a held breath. I was moving to the file cabinet to fetch a notebook when my hand froze. The folder holding the home deeds and wills wasn't there. I stood in silence, staring at empty space behind where it had always lived. I swear I left it closed on the top drawer last night. My pulse hammered. I yanked open other drawers, receipts, tax files, old letters, everything else in place. But the folder was gone. I pulled out my phone and searched for the digital backup. It was removed, erased, gone. I froze. This was no mistake. Someone crossed a line into sacred ground. I drove to Mason's house without thinking twice. No invitation, no warning. I walked in the door and found him in the living room, sitting in the same chair where he used to rest his head when he visited me. He looked up at me as if seeing a stranger. I confronted him: "Where is my folder? Did you take it?" His eyes darted away, and he swallowed hard. He wouldn't meet my stare. I told him how he used to defend me. How he'd once gone to bat when people overstepped. Now silence. He hesitated, voice weak. "Danica asked me to move it for safety." My heart clenched. Safety? It was theirs to hide, to rewrite. I realized then, I wasn't dealing with oversight. I was facing conspiracy. That evening, the family gathered. I walked in, head high, but with tightness in my chest. They announced new renovations, expansions, praise for their success. Tashira took the mic and thanked everyone, friends, neighbors, even staff. Everyone, that is, but me. The thank yous landed like knives in my ribs. I listened as names rolled off her tongue. Mine was gone. Afterward, as the crowd milled, I spotted a draft of her speech in Marveline's purse. I shrugged over, found the page where my name had been cut out, an earlier line, to Nerissa, for her unwavering support replaced with blank space. My name erased from their narrative. I stood there, chest tight, watching them talk achievements without me. Back at home, I lit candles, opened my Bible, hands trembling. I whispered to the silence, "I have earned my place by blood and love." They can't erase that. I composed a message to my lawyer friend, something's been stolen. I need you to help me prove ownership. I hovered over the send button before hearing the doorbell ring. I turned, surprised, someone was at my door I never expected. The sun hadn't even climbed above the horizon when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a message from Janelle, my niece's friend, the one who always had eyes where eyes didn't belong. She sent a screenshot from some party last weekend. The image stopped my breath cold. There I was, wearing a dress I hadn't picked. A pale cream uniform, the same worn by the event servers. That dress. I remembered it. I'd last worn it to church, pressed neat, felt proud in it. Now it was out in public, mocked. My body, my face, framed like a staff photo. I shot up from bed, headed straight to my closet. The hanger was empty. It wasn't there. And I didn't misplace it. No. Somebody took it out of my home, out of my memory, and paraded it to the world like I was someone to laugh at. I sat down on the edge of my bed and closed my eyes. There comes a moment when embarrassment hardens into something sharper. It ain't sadness no more. It's resolve. I got dressed, pulled my scarf tight, and headed out. My car knew the road well, it was the same event venue they loved to rent out for celebrations. I parked far from the entrance and walked in through the side, telling the receptionist I was there to volunteer. She didn't blink. In the wardrobe room, tucked in the back, I found a rack of outfits labeled guest staff. Neat tags attached with names handwritten, mine included. Mrs. Neressa, backup. Backup? I felt heat rise in my chest, but I kept it cool. Found the head of catering, a young woman with nervous eyes and a clipboard. I asked her, who approved this? She looked like she wanted to sink into the floor. Her voice cracked, instructions from the host. Said you were part of the hospitality story. I pulled out my phone. Hit record. Repeat that. She did. I walked out without another word. That dress wasn't about style. It was a message. You serve us now. But I don't serve lies. Later that afternoon, I decided to take a drive, to think. I wasn't ready to go home, but something pulled me down that road anyway. And I'm glad I listened. As I turned onto my street, I slowed down. Marveline's new Lexus sat in my driveway. Front door wide open. I parked down the block, walked through the side gate, and stepped inside like a stranger in my own life. My breath caught. The living room had been rearranged. My mama's quilt gone from the couch. Family portraits taken down, replaced with framed slogans like "Bless this mess." I walked room to room, my heels clicking slow on the floor I used to sweep. Then I saw it. A note on the kitchen counter, "Welcome to the new chapter." Like I was just a guest. Then I saw the paper underneath. A printed deed transfer. New owner, Cynthia Webb. To Shira's mother. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I went still. Later that night, I sat in my study. The only room they hadn't touched, probably 'cause they don't read. I opened the safe behind my bookshelf. The copies of the original documents were still there. Protected. My hands shook, but not from fear. I scanned and sent everything anonymously to a local paper. Title, "What They Don't Want You to See." I also attached the voice recording from the event venue. And then, I texted Mason. Just one question, think you still own this home? As the sky turned orange and pink behind the trees, I grabbed my purse, locked the door, and walked out. No rage. Just movement. By the time I pulled off the drive, I had one clear mission: expose them. I woke at dawn, restless even before daylight. The folder lay on my desk, every scrap of proof I'd collected stitched together like armor. Deed copies, receipts from that dress scheme, intercepted text messages, they'd all waited there, ready. I pulled open my hidden storage box and settled everything into an envelope marked truth. I took my time, breathing steady. I sent redacted versions to Darlene, Jerome, and a local journalist with ties to our church. I attached just enough to demand attention without giving away everything yet. Then I drafted an email titled "This ends now" to Mason and Danica. I practiced in the mirror, jaw firm, shoulders back, eyes unflinching. The weight of years pressed on me, but tonight would be the night I carried it like a crown instead of a burden. By evening, I stepped into the gathering room in black. It wasn't a dress for show, it was a uniform of claiming what was mine. Faces turned when I walked in, polite smiles flickering into confusion. No announcement, no escort, just me walking to the mic, silence spread like a curtain. I began, measured, slow, first the invitation manipulation, then the dress sabotage, then the deed transfer, then the voicemails sown with lies. I laid evidence on the table. When I pulled out a bank check with my name still printed on it, I raised it and said, "Here's the last check with my name you'll ever cash." The gasp in the room felt like wind breaking silence. Danica jumped to her feet. "You forged that," she accused, voice shaking. Marveline chimed in, telling me gratitude was overdue. Mason stammered, I didn't know." I stood there cool. I opened the folder again, pulled out the original documents, and played the voice recording from the caterer in front of them. Her words, trembling, host's orders. Tashira lunged. Her face red. But Cousins intervened, stepping between her and me. A guest murmured, "They've always been scared of Mama's quiet strength." The room crackled. I walked around the table, handed copies of the evidence to key family members. "Each of you deserves to hold your own truth," I said. I returned to my seat, the same seat I once occupied invisibly. Then I texted Mason, "This was never about material. It was always about respect." I stood and walked out, shoulders square. Outside, the night wrapped around me. Behind me, the front door slammed. The reckoning had begun. The house is quiet again, but not in the way it used to be. The silence now feels earned, like peace after a long storm. The echoes of that last night still hang in the walls, but softer, fading with each sunrise. Mason packed up a few days ago, took Tashira and Danica with him. The guest room where arguments once echoed now holds nothing but folded sheets and sunlight. I wake early, make tea, turn on the old gospel station, and sit by the window as the day begins. The wind through the trees sounds like release. Church friends started calling again, asking if I'm all right, saying they'd been praying for me. I tell them, I'm better than all right. I'm breathing again. A few days later, my old quilting circle comes by. They bring casseroles, pound cake, and laughter. Kenya, the youngest one, looks at me with tears in her eyes and says, "Miss Laverne, you taught us how to speak when it's hardest." Her words settle deep. For years I thought my silence protected my family. Turns out, it only protected the ones who hurt me. Now my story has become a small lesson for others, proof that even in our older years, we can rise and reclaim what's ours. I'm invited to speak at church the following Sunday. The pastor says people need to hear what strength looks like when it wears wrinkles. The local paper prints a short column called "A Mother's Fight for Dignity." I don't smile when I read it, I breathe. Because that's what this whole thing has been about, not revenge, but dignity. And for the first time in a long while, I feel seen. The final goodbye isn't loud or cruel, it's quiet, almost holy. One morning, I find a letter on the porch. Mason's handwriting. No apology inside, just a few lines about trying to become a better man. I stare at it for a long time. Then I strike a match, let the paper curl and blacken in the flame. When it's gone, I walk to the hallway and take down the family portrait. I don't cry. I just dust the frame and set it aside, making room for something new. In the garden, I dig into the soil where Mason and I once planted tomatoes. This time, I place tulip bulbs in the earth. My hands tremble, but not from weakness, from release. I whisper, I let you go, not because you deserve it, but because I do. The words float into the morning air. Peace doesn't crash in, it drifts, like a slow tide returning home. Now my days move differently. I journal each morning, short reflections, promises to myself. I applied for a grant to start a support group for elder women dealing with family betrayal. A seed of purpose grows in me. At the Sunday service, I stand at the pulpit in a simple blue dress. My voice doesn't shake when I say, sometimes dignity costs everything. But it's always worth it. The congregation rises, clapping through tears. As I step down from the stage, the church lights warm my shoulders. I no longer carry bitterness, only a calm strength that feels older than me. My feet touch the ground like I've found home again. And just as I turn the corner toward the exit, I see a face I never expected, someone waiting in the shadow of the doorway.